evening, ladies and gentlemen. Chancellor David Thodey, Vice Chancellor Professor Mark Scott, Provost Anna-Marie Jagosi, Professor Anna-Marie Jagosi, Professor Hesham El Gamal, Dean of Faculty of Engineering, distinguished members of the University Executive, Senate, and the Faculty of Engineering, Chris Von Willer, Chair of the Warren Centre, and members of the Warren Centre, Professor Hugh Durrant-White, New South Wales Chief Scientist and Engineer, our industry and government partners, and of course our distinguished guest speaker, Dr. Cathey Foley. So thank you very much all for being here. I know that it was a very long list and there are many other people that I couldn't name. So welcome all to the 2026 Warren Centre Innovation Lecture, one of Australia's leading forums for discussing ideas, technologies and policies that will shape our nation's future. My name is Kelina Yasef. I'm the Deputy Dean and Associate Dean Research Education of the Faculty of Engineering, and I will be your MC this evening. So, some housekeeping to start with. Can I ask you, of course, to put all your mobile phones to silent? Then all toilets, including the accessible bathroom, are located on the main ground floor, which is accessible through the stairs and down. So it's next to the foyer. It's in the foyer next to the box office. In the case of an evacuation, please exit the room in an orderly manner, following the exit signs and any instructions from the venue technical team. So it's my privilege to invite Councillor Yvonne Weldon, proud Wiradjuri woman and board member of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, to deliver the welcome to country.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, sisters and brothers, all genders and identities. As was said, my name is Yvonne Weldon. I am a Wiradjuri woman from Cowra, here in New South Wales, from the waters of the Clare, which later became known as the Lachlan, and of the Murrumbidgee rivers. I am a representative of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, who are caretakers with cultural authority under the Aboriginal Land Rights Act. I would like to pay my respects to all elders, past and present, to all First Nations, to you, and the ancestors of the lands that you've travelled from or are from. There is so much across this continent that is unknown, our practices of generations and generations. I thank the Faculty of Engineering for bringing us all together. We can and we do achieve so much more when we work together, to include rather than exclude. The Eora Nation's boundaries are the Hawkes River in the north, the Nepean in the west, and the Georges River in the south. On behalf of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, the elders, and also the members, I welcome everyone to the lands of the Gadigal. I acknowledge the Gadigal people, whose spirits and ancestors will always remain with this land, our Mother Earth. Our practices have sustained us through the thousands of generations, ingrained into the core of the country, and also into the core of each and every one of us, through the hundreds of nations, tribes and clans that have continued to exist here for over 65,000 years. My people, this country's people, are the oldest continuously living culture of the world. Today and every day, we are creating our fusion together, a connection of my people, your people, and all our people together. As we ponder over important milestones and points of changes in our lives, in our world, we need to think about the difference that we are making to become the milestones of our future. I thank you for your sharing, your insights on innovation, technology, and also the national impact. Your giving is a part of you, handing over to others. You all are inspiring us and encouraging us too, because it's not just the technology that has the intelligence, it is the brilliance of each and every one of us. Through your innovation, insights, and also this important lecture, use the opportunities to make positive differences and important changes and in a positive way for all. All of us together can bring about positive changes for multiple generations, from our ancient, still relevant world into our digital, contemporary one. Let us all draw upon my people's spirits as we continue on our journey. May my people's spirits walk with you and guide you as we strive forward for us all. Again, on behalf of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, Ninyini, Nala, Wongan, Māori, Budjari, Gadi, Nurda, welcome to Gadigal country. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. So I would now like to welcome to the lectern the Chancellor of the University of Sydney, David Thodey.
Well, good evening. Great to see so many people. It's welcome to the university, the wonderful, wonderful theatre here. And Yvonne, thank you for that wonderful welcome to country. It's always really important to recognise Gadi people and with the oneness that we can have, and learning has gone on for these lands for so long, and so we just pay our respects to your elders past and present and emerging, and all these young people are coming through, which was great. So. Great. I always look forward to this lecture, and I've been here a few years. And in fact, I was thinking when I was at Telstra, I can remember, nearly 30 years now this has been going. It's an incredible institution in both, Sydney, but also the university life. And why I've always liked it is because it's about bringing industry, academia, government together to talk about really important stuff to do with this country. And so this is not theory. And that's why it's so great to have Cathy, Dr Foley, I should say, Dr Foley, here today, because it is about how we work together. I've worked around this area for a long time, and I've seen this very tight connection between research and development, driving innovation, which then does drive industry policy and economics in the end of the day. This is not just about, and I love researchers, so don't get me wrong, but I'm about outcomes and about how we improve society and how we make a difference going forward. And there is a direct correlation between R&D, innovation, industry policy, which this country does not do well, but anyway, I'm allowed to talk about that, but then economic policy. And we need, for this country, a growth aspiration, because as you look at some of the challenges we've got, it's a wonderful country, we do so well, but productivity is not going where it needs to be. And if we don't get productivity right, then our competitiveness internationally is not where it needs to be. And guess what? Then standards of living start to decline. So this is sort of real stuff. And getting it right is really important. And so I'm really delighted that we've got Dr Foley here tonight. And I should say I've had the great privilege of working with Cathy, it'll be over a decade now, back at the CSIRO when she was Chief Scientist. I can still remember her standing at the back of one of the first presentations I gave. I could see she wasn't that happy, and then she hit me with a question anyway, but it was a great question, as always, So Cathy, it's great, and I do want to just spend a few moments just sort of introducing her, because her pedigree, her background is just outstanding, and we're very privileged to have her here tonight. So yes, we would say she is one of the most respected scientific leaders in Australia, and I think internationally as well. She was our chief scientist and one of our longest serving chief scientists as well, which is great. She's now president of ATSE and has many other responsibilities. But what she has always been a tireless advocate for science, technology, even the days I remember going out to Linfield and seeing the innovation and all the work with it that we're doing when she was at CSIRO, and improving, the lives of people. She's always been driven by making a difference, and I've seen that in her personal life, but also in her professional life as well. Physicist, originally, researcher, science communicator and national leader, and she has really championed so much for us and really made a difference, I think, in terms of, bringing science to Canberra. By the way, that's not easy. It's not easy in the, the push and shove of Canberra life, and she was a real advocate for what we needed to do. And so I'm really looking forward to hear her reflections. And of course, we had, the wonderful Ambitious Australia from Robin Denham and Dr. Fiona Wood and Kate Cornick and of course Professor Ian Chubb, which was published in March. And I think it touched on many of the things about having a big ambition for this country, about how we, bring people together to, achieve that, about how we can really use R&D, bring commercialisation and have a real focus. So, Cathy, I'll be really interested to hear what you have to say on that, because I do think it's a wonderful blueprint, brought together a lot of thinking, but we've got to do it, and that's what is the really important thing. But with that, it's my great pleasure to introduce the chair. It's actually, Chris, you're coming up now. Yeah, oh no, who am I passing to? Oh, totally out of control. But anyway, it'll be fun today. Okay, back to you. Thank you. Good, thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor, for those important contributions, and for you look like you were doing a really great job at doing the MC as well, so that's great. Next time we don't need anyone. So now I would like to invite Chris von Wille, Chair of the Warren Centre Advisory Board, on stage, and he's already here. Fantastic, thank you.
Thanks, Kalina, and good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, everyone, and welcome on behalf of the Warren Centre. For those of you that don't know us, the Warren Centre is an industry-linked centre within the university. Its mission is to promote innovation, advanced engineering, and partnerships with industry on behalf of the university, the faculty, and the engineering community. So this is the 30th of the innovation lectures. We started back in 1996. We've had some very distinguished lectures in the past. I see Hugh Durran-White, who's with us tonight, and I think Professor Salah Zakaria, and of course David Thodey 2 years ago was one of innovation lecturer. Our first one was delivered by John Bertrand, an engineer who'd recently come back from winning the America's Cup. He gave a talk in 1996 entitled Merging Fluid Dynamics Engineering with Tactical Sport Execution. And he set the tone for a lecture series that consistently celebrated the role of innovation, solving complex challenges. So innovation is important. Innovation and productivity have always been close companions. Back when we started in the 1990s, this series, productivity in Australia was growing nicely. The internet, the globalisation of industry, growth of computers was providing a good tailwind for innovation. But today it's lagging, as you know, it's stagnated, and the challenge is to use innovation, technology to help stimulate that. So it's more important than ever, and with that in mind, I'm delighted that Cathy Foley has agreed to be today's innovation lecturer, and I'm looking forward to hearing what she has to say. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chris. So, as you have already guessed, this year's lecture comes at a pivotal moment for Australia as we consider how research, innovation and industry collaboration can drive productivity, strengthen national resilience, and shape our future prosperity. Few Australians have contributed more to this conversation than today's speaker. Through her distinguished career as a scientist, innovator, and national science leader, she has helped shape our understanding of how research can deliver real-world impact for industry, government, and society. It's my great pleasure to introduce one of Australia's most respected scientific leaders and champions of innovation, Dr. Cathey Foley, President of the Australian Academy of Technological Sciences and Engineering. Dr. Foley is one of Australia's most respected physicists and scientific leaders, having served as Australia's chief scientist from 21 to 24. Prior to this appointment, she was chief scientist at CSIRO, where she built an outstanding career spanning more than 3 decades in research, innovation, and science leadership. Her work in solid-state physics, superconductivity, and semiconductor technologies has contributed significantly to scientific advancement and the commercialization of groundbreaking technologies used globally in mineral exploration. Throughout her distinguished career, Dr. Foley has been recognized for both her scientific excellence and her commitment to advancing science and technology in Australia. She played a key role in the development of the LENTEM sensor system, an innovation that has helped identify valuable mineral deposits worldwide and generated significant economic benefits. She also played a central role in devising Australia's first national quantum strategy. I understand that she will talk a little bit about this. Her achievements have earned numerous honours, including being appointed an Officer of the Order of Australia, receiving the Public Service Medal, and being elected a Fellow of both the Australian Academy of Science and the Australian Academy of Technological Sciences and Engineering. A passionate advocate for STEM education, diversity, and emerging technologies, Dr. Foley has championed greater participation of women in science and has been a leading voice in areas such as quantum technologies, critical technologies, and research innovation. Her leadership, vision, and dedication to public engagement continue to inspire the next generation of scientists and innovators across Australia and internationally. Please welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Cathey Foley.
So good evening, everyone. It's really wonderful to be here. I want to begin by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and thank Yvonne for that wonderful welcome. The traditional custodians of the land in which we meet, I want to pay my respects to their elders past and present. I also want to acknowledge that the continuing knowledge systems of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, because this knowledge is developed through tens of thousands of years of observation, experimentation, adaptation, and stewardship. And those knowledge systems are not simply part of Australia's past. They are part of a distinctive intellectual capability that Australia can bring to its future, and that's so important. But I also want to thank the Warren Centre and the University of Sydney for the invitation to give this lecture. It's given me a chance, being officially a nobody now, to actually be able to get on my soapbox, I guess. But also thank all three, Chris, David and Kalinda, for a very lovely set of introductions. It was really lovely. We also want to remember that the Warren Centre has always occupied an important space, not only celebrating engineering and innovation, but asking how knowledge becomes useful, how it becomes capability, better decisions, new industries, and a better society. And it's also great to see so many familiar faces here tonight. I've got a Chancellor, Deputy Vice-Chancellors. I'm not sure I've got a Vice-Chancellor I can't see in the audience, but fingers crossed. Deans, Chief Scientists, industry leaders, and so many of you here. It's just thrilling that you want to come and be interested in this topic, so I hope that I actually deliver. So tonight, I want to begin not with a graph, not with a ranking or a funding program, but with a question. And that is, what kind of country do we want Australia to be by 2040? And to answer this, we need to go a bit deeper. Do we want to be a country that supplies the world with just raw materials, or one that also invents, engineers, and manufactures the technologies those materials make possible? Do we want to celebrate Australian discoveries after they've created industries overseas? Or do we want to build capability to retain more of their value here? Do we want our young people to believe that the most exciting technological futures are being built somewhere else, or that they can be built here? And do we want the benefits of innovation to be connected in a few institutions and postcodes, or do we want to improve lives across the whole country? These questions go to the economy we build, the jobs that people can make careers around, the services available to communities, our security in an uncertain world, and our confidence as a nation. When I led the national conversation on behalf of the government to refresh Australia's national science and research priorities, I expected to hear competing visions. Instead, I was struck by the degree of common ground. Australians want prosperity, fairness, and access to opportunity wherever they live. They wanted security and resilience. They wanted transition to low emissions economy and to create industries and jobs. They wanted our environment protected and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's knowledge systems respected and elevated. They wanted science and technology to improve lives while preserving the social cohesion and democratic values that make Australia a good place to live. We disagree about many things, but we have surprisingly coherent view on the country we want to be. Our ambition is not unclear. The harder question is why we find it so difficult to organise ourselves to deliver it. Australia has world-class researchers, trusted institutions, abundant natural resources, a highly educated population, political stability, proximity to fastest growing region in the world, and the knowledge system of the world's oldest continuing culture. We've produced technologies that have changed industry and lives. We helped create Wi-Fi, we've developed vaccines, medical devices, agricultural technologies, advanced materials and instruments that see deeply buried mineral deposits. We have internationally significant capabilities in quantum science, astronomy, biotechnology, mining technology and clean energy. So tonight's question is not whether Australia is capable of innovation. We clearly are. The harder question is why those successes remain too exceptional, why repeatedly we demonstrate what is possible but struggle to turn it into sustained national capability. And an even harder question follows. How much of what holds us back is not imposed on us by geography, history or global markets, but by structures, incentives and habits we have created ourselves? My argument tonight is cautiously optimistic. Australia doesn't lack ideas, talent or good institutions. We have strong parts of an innovation system, but we have not done yet what it takes to make those parts work together consistently enough at sufficient scale for long enough to turn our strengths into lasting national advantage. We ask people to be ambitious inside a system whose structures often reward caution, fragmentation, short-termism, and institutional self-protection. That is not because people are acting badly. Governments, universities, research organisations, businesses and researchers are often behaving rationally in response to the incentives in front of them. But individually, rational behaviour can add up to a nationally unproductive result that has led to low research transactions, poor career mobility, siloed sectors and limited SMEs scaling up, to name a few. But the good news is that systems are made by people and they can be changed by people. So the challenge is whether we're prepared to do it. So I'm going to show my age and hopefully inspire you by using one of my favourite cartoons, Rocky and Bullwinkle, for those of you too young to know that, from my youth, and tell you a fractured fairy tale. And I'm going to cover 7 chapters and have 4 challenges. So, chapter 1, we know how to succeed. Let me start with something from my own career. As you heard earlier, my greatest research success was the development of mineral exploration tool known as LANTEM. It grew from superconductivity research at CSIRO. We were using superconducting quantum interference devices, or SQUIDs, with extraordinary sensitivity to magnetic fields. We could see signals that conventional instruments couldn't. The scientific data and idea was exciting, but the scientific idea was not yet an innovation. To become useful, it needed a real problem to solve. It needed engineering and a rugged equipment that could survive remote field locations and conditions. It needed software, signal processing, and people who understood geology and mineral exploration. It needed an industry partner prepared to test something new. It needed a business model, marketing, trusting, and trust. It also needed patience. It took roughly 12 years from our early field trial, which demonstrated a major technological advantage, to a commercial product that was adopted by the industry. During those years, we did not move in a straight line from discovery to market. Field results changed the engineering problems set us back to the physics, conversations with users changed what we thought the product needed to do. I travelled to mineral exploration conferences in Australia and Canada. I learnt that a technically superior instrument does not sell itself, and that the trust is built through repeated experience, not a brochure. Turning up over and over and over again was critically important. LANTEM is often described as a successful example of research translation, and that's true. It supported the discovery and delineation of major mineral deposits and contributed to creating significant value. But the more important lesson is that no single grant, organisation or brilliant person produced it. It required a system around the idea and enough continuity for that system to work. So I've often described this as science plus. Science was essential, but it was science plus engineering, design, a user who understood the problem, a business model, communication, standards, and people who could work across boundaries. It also needed science plus time. Breakthroughs are rarely the eureka moment. The breakthrough is often the long, difficult process of making the eureka moment useful. And that's why I'm cautious when people speak about the valley of death, as though translation involves one missing bridge between the laboratory and the market. And unfortunately, there is rarely one valley. There are many discontinuities between scientific proof and reliable engineering, between a prototype and production, between a product and a customer, between domestic customer and an export market, and between the first skilled team and the workforce needed to scale. At each discontinuity, the question is not whether the technology works, it is whether the next part of the system is ready to receive it. Consider Wi-Fi. We celebrate the Australian research that has helped make fast wireless networking possible, and rightly so. But its genealogy, thanks to Bob Frater, who put this together, includes decades of radio astronomy, mathematics, signal processing, semiconductor technology, software, standards, intellectual property, skilled engineers, and global markets. Or consider Australia's quantum capability. It began by a small group asking difficult questions, often without any immediate industrial application. Those groups grew. Centres of excellence built critical mass. Students were trained, facilities and international networks were developed, companies emerged, and governments began to see strategic opportunity. What looks today like a new sector is the result of capability compounding over decades. We also know what kinds of institutions and programs have often worked. Cooperative research centres have created sustained partnerships around industry and public challenges. ARC Centres of Excellence have built internationally recognised capability and trained generations of researchers. NCRIS has provided facilities and expertise that individual institutions could not sensibly create alone. And public research agencies preserve capabilities markets will not maintain by themselves. And universities create new knowledge, educate people, and connect Australia to global research. These successful challenges share 4 features. First is they build capability, not just projects. They build people, equipment, relationships, tacit knowledge, and the ability to respond to opportunities we cannot yet predict. The second is they operate at sufficient scale. Small efforts generate ideas, but national capability needs critical mass. And the third is they cross institutional boundaries. The best innovation is usually produced by networks, not isolated organisations. And finally, they are given time. And I must say, time is not a substitute for performance. Long-term funding should never mean an absence of review, but deep capability cannot be switched on and off with each budget cycle. Where Australia has succeeded, it has usually done so by behaving differently from the way much of the rest of our innovation system normally behaves. And Australia's quantum story is a good example. We've been patient enough for expertise to compound, concentrated enough effort to create critical mass, and connected institutions around a common purpose. So we do know how to succeed. The question is why we have not made those conditions normal. So let's look at Chapter 2, the Australian paradox. Australia has an innovation paradox. We produce excellent research and contribute far more to global knowledge than our population size might suggest. Yet our economy remains less complex than we would expect from that strength. Business expenditure in R&D is weak by international standards. Collaboration between businesses and publicly funded research organisations is limited, and too often promising Australian companies are acquired or move offshore before they reach scale. This is not evidence that our researchers have failed. It is evidence that research excellence and an effective innovation system are not the same thing. For years, we have debated this as though one part of the system must be at fault. Universities are told to commercialise more, researchers are told to be more entrepreneurial, businesses are told to invest more, governments are told to spend more or regulate less, and investors are told to provide patient capital. There's truth in each statement, but none is adequate by itself. The problem is that the jobs, incentives, timeframes and interfaces across the system do not line up. We call for our collaboration, but fund competition. Universities and research organisations are encouraged to work together in the national interest while competing for grants, students, rankings, infrastructure prestige and scarce discretionary funding. Competition can improve quality, but it also consumes time and can encourage duplication, secrecy and long-term and short-term positioning. When almost every relationship is also a competition, collaboration becomes a transaction rather than a habit. We ask for long-term capability, but fund short-term projects. And we recognise that capabilities in biosecurity, measurement, advanced manufacturing, quantum and climate science must be maintained over decades. Yet much of the work is assembled from grants lasting 3 or 4 years. And highly trained people spend an extraordinary amount of time securing the next piece of funding before the current work is mature. We ask researchers to take risks, but assess them through conservative measures. We want researchers to be interdisciplinary, entrepreneurial, collaborative and mobile, and we want them to contribute to standards, infrastructure, mentoring, communication and translation, but careers and funding are still dominated by publication counts, journal prestige, grant income and conventional pathways. Metrics are not neutral. People respond to what the system rewards, not only to what its strategy says. If leaving a university for industry makes it harder to return, mobility will remain limited. And if we failed high-risk projects and see them as damaging careers, more than a safe incremental project will be where people will go, and they'll learn to avoid genuine risk. We ask universities to do more, but we do not clearly define or fund their expanded role. Universities are now expected to educate, create knowledge, translate research, build sovereign capabilities, support national missions, that's a long list, engage industry, attract international traffic, commercialise intellectual property and help diversify the economy. This is a big ask, and they might be legitimate expectations, but we have not had an honest conversation about priority, role and cost. The university can win a grant and it still incur financial liability because the grant does not cover the full cost of doing the research. We shouldn't be surprised when organisations optimise for measures and revenue streams on which their survival depends. We ask industry to innovate, but focus heavily on the supply of ideas and not enough on the demand. Patents, commercially aware researchers and startups matter, but translation is not simply pushing research out of universities. It also depends on organisations capable of pulling knowledge in. Businesses need skilled people and customers willing to adopt new products, demonstration sites or test beds, and standards, regulatory pathways, procurement opportunities, supply chains, and capital for scale. A startup can die between a successful prototype and a bankable order. A procurement process can unintentionally favour a familiar imported solution because it appears safer. We celebrate startups, but we make scale-up difficult. An innovation economy cannot be built only on the birth of companies. It depends on their adolescence and adulthood. And we need more firms able to grow from small to medium and to become globally competitive while retaining substantial capability and decision-making in Australia. An early exit can be rational for founders and inventors, but it becomes the national default pathway when Australia repeatedly sells the seed before it becomes a tree. We want coordination, but we preserve silos. The energy transition is simultaneously a technology, infrastructure and workforce. It requires finance, regulation, community and foreign policy challenges. Biotechnology involves health, science, regulation. manufacturing, skills, data, capital and procurement, and yet governments remain organised into portfolios, universities into faculties, and businesses into divisions. Specialisation is necessary, but silos aren't. Fragmentation occurs when participants cannot see the whole system, do not know who is responsible for the next step, and are rewarded for optimising their own part. And Australia's distinctive structure makes this harder. We are a federation, a medium-sized country with a small population, say about the size of Shanghai, spread across a continent the size of mainland USA, and an economy dominated by SMEs, which account for about over 90% of Australian businesses. While we should learn from other countries, we can't import a single visible program and expect the same results. I'm sure you all know about the Industry Growth Centre program. Each centre started with about $40 million over 7 years. Then it hit a funding cliff. And compare this with the UK catapults, which have been running for about 15 years with reviews every 5 years. And in recent budget cycles, funding was actually increased to $66 million per year for each of the catapults. They had exponential growth impact. And let's hope that Quantum Australia is continued funding so we can see that happen. Because you see, the UK story, it took years to see measurable economic impact. But if you're patient, it will take off. But if you're not, you will end up stopping the funding before something happens. Programs work within systems. They rely on surrounding institutions, finance, markets, procurement, skills and culture. And over time, Australia has created hundreds of programs, rules, reporting requirements and interfaces. And many were introduced for good reasons to protect public money, ensure quality, promote fairness and manage risk. But structures accumulate. Rules outlive the problems they were designed to solve. A new initiative is added to compensate for a weakness in an existing one. And eventually, energy that should go into innovation is consumed by navigating the system. Researchers become expert grant writers. Universities develop specialist teams to negotiate incompatible processes. Startups spend scarce time moving between programs and agencies. And industry partners can find the system too slow and walk away. Accountability, integrity, security and fairness matter enormously, but every control has a cost. A mature system not only asks what risk does this rule prevent, but also what opportunity does this rule delay or destroy? And that question is not asked often enough. So let's go to chapter 3, why we keep falling back. Why, after decades of reviews and reforms, do we keep returning to familiar patterns? And one reason is that we still imagine innovation as a pipeline. Basic research flows into applied research, then development, then commercialisation and market impact. It's simple, it's tidy, but it's largely wrong. I actually like the way David Suzuki explains it. He said that science is not does not progress in an easy, linear fashion. It's not like you have an idea, set up an experiment, prove your theory, and then cure cancer. Rather, innovation is a network. A customer may reveal the research question, a regulatory requirement may force a redesign, an engineering failure might expose a scientific problem, a standard may create a global market, a talented graduate moving into a company may transfer more knowledge than a patent license does. When policy is designed around a linear pipeline, the spaces between formal stages become gaps, and everyone is responsible for their component, but no one owns the journey. The second reason is that announcing a program is easier than building capability. Programs are visible, they have names, they have launch dates, application rounds and budgets. Capability, it's slower and harder to attribute. It resides in teams and equipment, relationships, institutional memory and accumulated experience. And this creates a bias towards new initiatives rather than sustained capability. And a third reason is that we are impatient for impact, but uncomfortable with failure. Innovation requires experimentation, yet public failure can be interpreted as waste. So everyone is encouraged to promise certainty when none exists. And applicants overstate likely impact, and programs prefer projects that are easier to explain. Milestones become evidence that the plan was followed rather than the idea remains worthwhile. We need a more mature distinction. We should be patient about the mission, but demanding of the projects. A national goal may require commitment over decades, and within it, projects should be reviewed rigorously. Some continued, some redirected, some scaled, and some just stopped. Patient policy should mean long-term direction combined with disciplined experimentation and the capacity to fail early without abandoning the national goal. And this requires a different culture of accountability. Accountability should not mean proving that every prediction made at the beginning was correct. In uncertain work, that can reward caution and conceal learning. Better accountability asks whether the assumptions were tested, whether the evidence changed the direction, whether weak approaches were stopped, and whether a knowledge was carried to the next decision. It also requires political and institutional permission to say publicly that an experiment didn't work. A country that punishes every visible failure will produce invisible failure, safe projects, inflated promises, and opportunities never attempted. The fourth reason is that we keep adding rather than redesigning. When a gap appears, our instinct is to create another grant, a committee, another office, a strategy, a coordination mechanism. Each may be sensible by itself, but together they increase complexity and diffuse responsibility. Australia's innovation system doesn't need another layer. It needs the courage to remove some. And this is difficult because every program has participants who value it. Every rule has a history, and every institution has legitimate interests. And people who succeed in a complex system become really good at operating within it. Careers and teams become attached to existing measures, and reform therefore cannot be achieved only by asking what additional support everyone would like. We must also ask what should stop, what should be simplified, and what should be combined, and which incentives are producing the behaviour we no longer want. That conversation requires trust, a shared destination, and leadership prepared to accept the meaningful change that will sometimes be uncomfortable. So here we go to Chapter 4, David, on Ambitious Australia and an opportunity to think as a system. And that's why I think this recent Ambitious Australia report matters, because a strategic examination of research and development was the most comprehensive review of Australia's R&D system in decades. Its 20 recommendations are organised around 6 connected elements: greater focus and scale, world-class foundational research system, stronger incentives for innovation and businesses and industries, investment in capital across the innovation cycle, workforce capability, and government leadership. The significance of the report is not that every recommendation is perfect or that it contains one previously undiscovered answer. Its importance is that it treats research and development and innovation as a system. It recognises that increasing research funding without addressing incentives, capital, workforce, coordination and demand will not be enough. It recognises that business innovation cannot be separated from foundational research and skilled people. It recognises that government is not merely a funder standing outside the system. Government is a major customer, a regulator, an employer, an investor, a convener, and the holder of national objectives. And it recognises that reforms are interdependent. That is a long overdue shift in the national conversation. And in 2026-27, we saw the budget responding to parts of the report, including the investment in public science institutions, changes intended to build business innovation incentives, steps towards stronger international research connections, and the establishment of a National Resilience and Science Council to improve alignment between public R&D, investment, and national objectives. These are meaningful early steps, but they are not the completion of the task. But a report cannot align the system by itself, and a new council cannot substitute for decisions about the priority and the role of accountability. I think I've gone too far. That's, hang on. Where have I gone? Yes, I'm sorry, I've just gone back to one task too far. All right, oh well, I'll go here. I've missed a slide. And funding announcement cannot create collaboration unless surrounding incentives that support it. And reform will not endure if it is understood as the agenda of one minister and one department, one government or one sector. And building an innovation system is a national project measured over decades. And I'm going to give you the example which came up a bit early here, when former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull's National Innovation and Science Agenda, NISA, which happened in December 2016, which we are now reaping the rewards of that investment, because it included quantum, a lift in entrepreneurship in the research sector due to the CSIRO ON program, which still operates today after about 10 years. And the response to the Ambitious Australia report will also require us to have sustained commitment across political cycles. And it will require universities, publicly funded research organisations and industry, investors and governments to change their own practices, not only to ask others to change. Ambitious Australia is a report that gives us an architecture for the conversation, but we should resist the temptation to implement it as separate. That's 20 separate recommendations assigned to separate agencies. That would reproduce the fragmentation the report is trying to address. The test is not whether each recommendation has a responsible officer and an implementation plan. The test is whether the combined reforms change the experience people have in trying to move an idea through the system. Can a small company find the right support without employing a consultant to map the government programs? Can a researcher move into industry and return without losing a decade of career progression? Can a national research facility plan beyond the next funding cliff? And can government identify work of strategic value early enough to protect, procure and scale it? And can Australian technology secure credible first customers here? Those are system-level tests, and they are experienced at the interfaces where institutional responsibilities meet. The harder work is implementation, building the culture, the incentives, the interfaces and the patience that allow architecture to deliver. So let's go to chapter 5. And I want to have a new national bargain for innovation. What might be more effective for Australian innovation, and what might that look like? I don't think we need one perfect organisational chart. Innovative ecosystems need diversity, experimentation and room for unexpected ideas. But I believe we need a clearer national bargain built around 5 disciplines. And here they are. We've got to choose, connect, fund, demand and persist. So let's go through them. Choose. Australia cannot lead in everything. That can sound like a threat to discovery research, but it shouldn't be. Discovery needs diversity, and breakthrough ideas often emerge from small groups and research questions whose value in the future is impossible to predict. We must preserve curiosity, exploration and surprise. But national industrial and technological capability, it requires concentration. When research strength, national need, market opportunity and comparative advantage align, Australia must be able to build critical mass. Giving everyone a little may appear fair, but we can leave every area alone and if we don't let it scale to the required level for impact. And this culture is unfortunately strong in Australia, and I think it starts in school where we give every child a prize. And we need the confidence to pursue fewer, bigger things while maintaining the broad foundation from which the next opportunity can emerge. Choosing also means deciding what we will not attempt at scale. And a strategy that contains everything is not a strategy, it's just an inventory. Let's look at the next, it's connect. We need clearer roles and stronger interfaces. Universities, public research agencies, medical institutes, hospitals, governments, businesses, museums and national infrastructure create and use knowledge differently. That diversity is a strength, and we should not make every organisation resemble every other one. Universities should not become contract research companies. Public agencies should not duplicate universities. Businesses should not be expected to fund public good research from which they cannot capture value. Government should not outsource all scientific capability and then discover it cannot be an intelligent customer. Clarity of role, however, must not mean rigidity of boundary. People and knowledge need to move, and researchers should be able to spend time in industry or government without damaging their careers. Industry engineers should contribute to teaching and research. Public servants need access to expertise and the capability to interpret it. And translation must be recognised as teamwork, involving engineering and design, regulation, intellectual property, manufacturing, finance, communication and market information. Not an expectation that one researcher becomes an expert in everything. Is it really realistic to expect the modern researchers to discover something, start a company and win a Nobel Prize? Rather, the most important connection is often between people who understand and trust one another. We should invest in those relationships as deliberately as we invest in the equipment. So let's look at funding. We need to fund selected work for success. And that means being honest about the true cost of research. If a project is worth doing, the system should be transparent about who pays for the people, the facilities, the security, the integrity, the administration and maintenance required to do it properly. Co-investment can create commitment and leverage, but it should build partnerships, not conceal underfunding or shift costs between institutions and portfolios. Funding for success also means investing in people. A system cannot claim to value its future workforce when relying on inadequate PhD stipends that are below the poverty level, and then when we're graduating them to do research and support them by short-term contracts. Insecurity has intellectual consequences, and people choose safer questions, leave research, and become less mobile because every move carries risk. It also means world-class infrastructure with long-term operating certainty, not only capital for a new building or an instrument. And it means sharing risk more intelligently. At present, risk is often shifted down the chain. Government shifts it to institutions through partial funding. Institutions shift it to researchers through short contracts. Large organisations shift it to small companies through unpaid trials or slow procurement. And investors seek rapid exits through later stage pathways that are uncertain. A productive system does not remove risk. It allocates risk to the party best able to manage it, and it shares reward when successes occur. The purpose of accountability should be to support learning and good decisions, not create the appearance that uncertainty has been eliminated. Let's look at demand. We need innovation policy that pays as much attention to adoption as invention. Government procurement can create reference customers, validate technologies, and help Australian firms cross from prototype to scale. And that doesn't mean buying inferior products because they're Australian. It means designing procurement so innovative solutions can compete and be reasonable in the risk that can be managed. Standards and regulation are also innovation infrastructure, and good standards make technologies interoperable and trusted. Clear regulation reduces uncertainty. Test beds and demonstrators allow customers, regulators and investors to see technology working in real conditions. Businesses need absorptive capacity, people able to recognise useful research and bring it into operations. The movement of educated people into the economy is one of our biggest mechanisms for technology transfer. The most important technology transfer office in Australia is not a building. It is the graduates, the engineers and the researchers who carry knowledge, the methods and networks between sectors. And we need to persist. And that is, stay the course. Deep capability takes time. Centres of Excellence, CRCs, national infrastructure and quantum capability have generated real value because expertise and relationships were allowed to compound. Persistence doesn't mean preserving every program unchanged. It means maintaining the objective, the capability and institutional memory while learning from evidence. We should be willing to end a weak project without ending the mission. We should be able to say this approach did not work here, but this is what we learned and here is the next experiment. A mature innovation nation is not one that never fails. It's one that learns faster than others, preserves what is valuable and remains committed to its larger purpose. Okay, so what does that mean for all of you in the room? Well, systems can sound abstract, but they are made from decisions taken by institutions and people like you in the room. Every grant rule, promotion criterion, contract process, procurement requirement and reporting obligation was created by someone. It can be examined and changed, and as I've often said, unless it goes against the law of physics, we can change something. And for universities, including Sydney University and many academics here tonight, it means looking honestly at the behaviour our institutions reward. Do promotion systems genuinely value collaboration, teaching, infrastructure, standards, policy, standards development, policy contribution, industry engagement and translation? Or do we praise those activities while advancement remains tied mainly to publications, grant income and conventional prestige? Does time in industry or government strengthen an academic career or interrupt it? Do intellectual property and contracting processes protect real value or spend months arguing over ownership of value that doesn't exist yet? Do we recognise that education itself is a central part of innovation? Universities transfer knowledge every time a graduate enters a workplace, able to ask better questions, interpret evidence, and connect with professional networks. This matters particularly for higher degree researchers and early career academics. We should not train talented people for a single narrow destination and then describe them as having left research when they move into industry, government, teaching, standards, or entrepreneurship. We are carrying research capability into places where Australia needs it the most. A successful research career should be understood by contribution and capability, not by proximity to one institutional pathway. And for universities, a stronger innovation system does not mean becoming less committed to discovery. It means connecting discovery more effectively to people able to use it, while protecting the intellectual independence on the future discovery that depends on it. For government, it means being more than a collection of funding programs. Government must provide direction and continuity, as well as intelligent demand. It must sustain a limited number of national missions, a coordinated portfolio, must retain enough scientific capability so it can be an informed customer and regulator, and use procurement and standards and public investment coherently. It must also simplify. For every new reporting requirement, ask what decision it will improve, and for every new program, ask whether an existing one should change or end, and for every risk control, assess the cost of delay and lost opportunity. Good government does not avoid all risk. It makes risk visible and manages it in a service to public value way. For industry, it means not waiting at the end of the pipeline for universities to deliver finished, de-risked products. The strongest collaboration begins with a shared problem definition. Businesses need to invest in R&D capability and in people able to work with external knowledge. Large companies can create pathways for Australian suppliers and provide demonstration opportunities and become first customers. Boards and executives need to treat R&D not only as a discretionary cost, but as a capability linked to their long-term competitiveness. For investors, it means recognising that deep technology has different timeframes, and risks from customer software and building the technical capability and patient pathways are needed for later stage growth. For researchers and engineers, it means being excellent in our disciplines, but curious about the systems around our work. Who might use the knowledge, what evidence they need, what standard or regulation applies, and which other disciplines must be involved. It means valuing bridge builders, translators and technical specialists, designers and entrepreneurs, policy experts and communicators whose work can be visible in conventional measures. And for leaders, it means aligning incentives, resources and decisions beneath the ambitious goal. And it means protecting space for challenge and accepting that collaboration may require surrendering some control or credit, sustaining the direction after the launch event, and stopping activities that no longer serve the mission. The hardest barrier is often not somebody else's policy, and it is the practice inside our own institutions that we know is no longer working, but have learnt to navigate rather than challenge. And this takes culture change. This takes culture change that is too often seen as too hard to do and takes a long time. But I'm going to challenge that, does it? I want you to think about a flock of birds turning suddenly in the sky. From a distance, it looks almost magical, as though thousands of birds are sharing a single thought, and yet a classical model has showed that this extraordinary collective movement could emerge from three simple local behaviours. Don't collide with your neighbours, adjust to their direction, and stay connected to the group. Culture can change in much the same way. It is not only determined by what governments announce or leaders say, it is shaped by what we see in each of us and in the people around us and what we're doing. We need separation, the guardrails that protect people and preserve room for difference. We need alignment, leaders and peers visibly modelling their behaviour. We want to become as the normal way of behaving. And we need cohesion as a shared purpose strong enough to keep us together while we change direction. But human societies need something more. We must consciously decide where we are going, because coordinated movement is not by itself progress. A flock can move in perfect formation and still head in the wrong direction. So let's go to chapter 7, what can we control? Well, in 1975, when I just finished high school, I spent time volunteering in the Aboriginal community in Bourke. I went there with the confidence of a young person just fresh out of school who wanted to help save the world. I came away with a much clearer understanding of myself. I realised I was not best suited for making change one person at a time. I wanted to understand and change systems. I soon afterwards discovered science, and 50 years later, I can see that much of my career has followed that thread. As a researcher, I wanted to understand how the physical world works and turn that knowledge into something useful. At CSIRO, I learnt that research impact depends on institutions, partnerships, and patient capability. As chief scientist, I had no large budget and no department to command. My principal tools were evidence, relationships, convening power, and influence. That experience taught me something important. You do not need to control every lever to create change, but you do need to understand the system, know which lever is available, and be prepared to use it. Sometimes the lever is a formal decision. Sometimes it is a well-framed question that changes the discussion. Sometimes it's bringing people together who have never seen themselves as part of the same problem. Sometimes it's evidence that gives a decision maker permission to act. And sometimes it's persistence, returning to an idea after the first idea is no, because the conditions have changed or the case has become clearer. Influence can look modest in the moment, but over time it can change what an institution considers normal, what a government believes is possible, or what a young person imagines they can become. It's easy to talk about the system as though it's a force of nature. The system becomes an excuse. The system will not allow it. The system is too complex. The system has always worked this way. But the system is the accumulation of and a result of many choices. Some choices were made decades ago. Some were made for circumstances that no longer exist. Some are remade every day when we apply for a familiar metric, renew a program without review, insist on a standard contract, or reward the same kind of success. But we do not control everything. Australia is affected by global markets, geopolitics, technological change and climate, population, geography, and decisions made elsewhere. But we control more than we sometimes admit. We can choose the metrics we use. We can design the careers that allow movement. We can coordinate and collaborate. We can decide whether a meeting is for information, consultation, or decision. We can simplify an agreement. We can expand access to knowledge by adopting public open access model to research literature, something I've been championing for some time and I had to squeeze in here somehow. We can invest in diverse teams and inclusive institutions. We can choose to fund fewer things properly rather than many things inadequately. We can ask whether a rule is still serving its purpose. We can reward those who take responsible risks, and we can celebrate success without pretending it was inevitable or achieved by one hero. And we can refuse to allow the complexity of the existing system to become the argument against change. And I won't go through it there, but Buckminster Fullerene, who invented buckyballs, has had a good word there. So I want to put a challenge to you, or 4 challenges to you. The first is, which rule solved yesterday's problem but is now preventing today's or tomorrow's opportunity? Every institution has one, and that's your homework tonight. Most of them have many, so think about what that is. The second is, where are our stated ambitions contradicted by what we reward? If a strategy says collaboration, but promotion, funding, and prestige say competition, the incentives will win. The third is, what would we fund and sustain for 10 years if we were genuinely serious? Not what we could announce, not what would fit neatly within one budget. What capability would we be prepared to build patiently, review honestly, and defend through inevitable setbacks? And the fourth challenge deals with the reform processes least often dealt with. What are we prepared to stop doing to make room for something more ambitious? Not everything old is bad. Stable institutions and accumulated experience and expertise are among Australia's greatest strengths. But reverence for continuity must not become fear of change. An innovation system cannot innovate itself, and it won't deliver an innovative nation. 60 years ago, you'll probably remember, some of you anyway, that Donald Horne challenged the comforting description of Australia as a lucky country. His point was not that Australia lacked advantages. It was that we relied too heavily on them, that prosperity built on natural endowment and favourable circumstances could conceal a lack of enterprise and ambition. This challenge has not entirely disappeared. Australia still possesses extraordinary comparative advantages from mineral and energy resources, essential to the global transition to an educated, multicultural population in the Asia-Pacific. A comparative advantage is only potential. It becomes a natural advantage or a national advantage when people organise around it, add knowledge to it, invest in it, create markets for it, and remain committed long enough for capability to compound. Australia does not need to become Silicon Valley or Germany, Singapore, Israel or South Korea. Their systems grew from their histories and their institutions. We need to build an Australian innovation system, a system suited for a large continent, a federation, an economy dominated by small businesses but anchored by globally significant industries. A system that connects universities, public research agencies, government, industry and communities without making them all the same. A system that understands discovery, research and industry capability as complementary. A system that can concentrate effort without closing the door to new ideas. A system that is patient with national purpose, rigorous with projects and honest about failure. A system that creates sophisticated customers, not only clever inventors. And a system in which talented people can move between sectors without sacrificing their careers. A system that is navigatable by small businesses, not only by institutions able to employ teams of specialists. We already know more than enough to begin. We know that long-term capability, relationships, infrastructure and skills matter. We know that incentives shape behaviour. We know that demand matters as much as supply. We know that fragmented programs do not automatically add up to a coherent system. And we know that ambition without sustained action is simply aspiration. The question is not another review that can describe the problem. The question is whether we are prepared to act differently because we understand it. Our government's prepared to sustain direction beyond one budget. A university is prepared to change measures and processes that reward familiar forms of success. Is industry prepared to invest in long-term R&D and Australian suppliers? Are investors prepared to develop the patience and expertise that deep technology requires? And are researchers prepared to cross boundaries and share credit? Are leaders prepared to remove complexity, make choices and stop activities that no longer serve the larger purpose? The country we want to become will not arrive through luck. It will be built through thousands of decisions that we fund, what we reward, what we buy, teach, regulate, measure, simplify, sustain and change. Such decisions are made by people like you in this room. That is why I remain optimistic. The parts are here, the talent is here, the opportunity is here. We've shown many times that Australia can produce world-leading ideas and turn them into impact. Our task now is to make successes less exceptional, to build a system in which capability compounds, ambition is matched by patience, and innovation becomes part of how Australia sees itself. Australia does not need more luck. It needs us to choose the country we want to become and redesign our institutions, incentives and behaviour to make that country possible. So the question is whether we are prepared to change. And I believe we are. As the moral to the fractured fairy tale says, we have the power, we can lead, and we can make changes. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Cathy. We need you a little bit longer. We're
Yeah,
going to,
sure.
after such an insightful address, we're going to take some questions from the audience. So, I think we've got 2 microphones going around in the room. I don't know where they are. They're here and there. So, I'm opening the floor to question. Yes? The gentleman there. Sorry, I can't see. And John first, yes, sure. In the same line, that's fine.
Thank you very much. That was the most stimulating talk. Thank you so much for that talk. I want to just hark back a little bit to something the Chancellor said, that he mentioned that we seem to keep focus on productivity. And I just wonder, is that helpful in trying to get the best out of our innovation?
That's a good question. I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert in productivity, but I think the thing is, are we asking the right questions? And are we expecting someone magic in Canberra to do something that's suddenly going to make us all productive? So that's one thing. I think the other is also looking at, look, there's just so many things in the way modern society operates. I mean, let me just go through one really basic example. And it's just, being able to run a system that takes into account that, especially in modern society, we have a desire to have lives as well as work, which I think is possibly a new thing, or maybe a renewed thing. And I've really noticed this particularly because I've always worked mostly with male populations, being a physicist. And so when I was in the Chief Scientist office in Canberra, and it was the first time I ever worked in an office which only had women, and the thing which was really interesting was, and I saw this a bit at CSIRO, but I saw it on steroids in Canberra, was when it's school holidays. I don't know about you, but I get 4 weeks annual leave, and my kids, well, they're grown up now, but they had 12 weeks school holidays. So what do we do with the 8 weeks? And how are we meant to be productive and be able to operate when we don't even look after really basic things? Like, we do want to reproduce ourselves as a population. We do need that. Someone's going to pay for my old age. And we do, want to make sure that we support people, but we do not have the systems in place that actually look at how we operate. And so there's some things like that which, to be honest, if you look at the holiday periods when schools are on, productivity just nosedives because people are trying to juggle things, stresses are high. The interpersonal actions and anxiety is high. If you actually mapped the number of anxiety moments in a workplace, it always goes up through the roof when it's school holiday time. And then the other one is we also want women to go back into the workforce, and also it's great to see fathers as well taking their share of parental leave. And yet when kids start in any external environment like childcare or school, we all know the first 6 months they're all sick, you're sick, everybody's sick, and they run out of parental leave, and we see a lot of people just walking away from work because it's all too hard. I mean, they're just two examples of things where we just even haven't got really basics going. And then if you look at just even the way we work in the workplace, and a really good example is at the moment, there's a lot of discussion about AI, and that seems to be something that's coming in. And at the moment, it's almost like if you use an AI tool, you're cheating, or you're not seeing it as a productivity lift. And there's a really strong cultural thing about that. So everyone's using it under the radar, which might have some security issues and stuff, rather than owning up to owning up. You shouldn't even have to say that. It's saying, I use Excel spreadsheets. I don't have to use a calculator anymore. I go through and use Mathematica if it's going to do some maths for me because it's just much faster and my maths isn't as good as it used to be. You can go on about things which are normal. Another one, I'm terribly dyslexic. I hope I didn't have any spelling mistakes in my slides. But thank God for Grammarly and spell checkers because it changed my life. And so these things have just become the norm. But in that transition period, we seem to give ourselves a hard time. And so therefore these are things which add to productivity. And then of course, as I mentioned, all the rules, regulations, and we keep building rather than simplifying. So look, I don't know what the answer is other than we really do need to look at some of the real basics and then build on that. And I think you might find productivity would uplift.
So we had a question over there. And then...
Thank you very much there, Cathy. Great presentation. My name's Christian Ruberg. I'm ex-CSIRO. I've just missed you in West Lindfield. I'm ex-Meat and Livestock Australia, and I'm ex-Australian Wool Testing Authority. I've spent my career working with mid-sized companies, and we developed and commercialised a whole bunch of equipment and we occasionally glanced past universities and CSIRO and utilised their IP in that journey. My observation is that the conversation around innovation seems to me to be too much around the university sector, and I think should we be putting more attention and providing more resources to mid-sized companies who have great domain knowledge. They really know, they're in business, and that sector seems to me to require much more support and developing innovation systems within these mid-sized companies. And then if that was the way forward, what organisation can best coordinate developing our advanced technology sector, the growth of that? Is it the Academy of Science? Is it the Institution of Engineers? Is it the Department of Industry? Is it the AI, the Australian Industry Group? I don't have an answer to that. Which organisation is best placed to coordinate this kind of growth of the missing middle, which a lot of industry people are now talking about? Thank you.
And they'll be accountable, so you've got to answer right.
That's a really tough question because it's probably the big question in Australia. So if you look at it, I forget it, you see different numbers. So there's obviously 99%, 95% of our businesses in Australia are SMEs, and 70% of them have less than 20 people. So you're a small part of being that the medium-sized company in Australia is a huge gap. And that's a big problem because a lot of our multinationals who, if they're part of a supply chain, multinationals prefer to buy from at least a medium-sized company, not from a startup because of the risks involved. So that's something when I know IISA, which is about to be merged into that new Science and Resilience Council, really did a lot of work on that, looking at the missing middle and what aren't we doing to support companies to scale up and also look at the different programs. I think you hit the nail on the head as to who is coordinating things, because it's interesting if you talk to Sally Ann Williams, who used to be the CEO of Cicada and now changed to a different role in life, doing board work. She used to say that a lot of the businesses that came into Cicada were actually ones that came out of industry, not necessarily out of the university sector. And I think we do, it's something which I did mention, I probably didn't dwell on enough, but is I actually think that, first of all, the universities are asked to do the impossible. I gave that huge long list of their tasks, but you're actually funded to do pretty much teaching, and even then probably not funded enough to do that. And so the idea of doing, and the importance of doing research and creating new knowledge is absolutely part of humanity. It's where universities are the place of enlightenment for modern society. So how do we actually get it so that we have all these different parts of the system working together? And I think you hit the nail on the head is who's the convener or the organiser of it? And that's what we don't have. And I have this secret hope that this new council or something that government's planning to is going to do that. But it's actually one of the things which I found was really interesting was actually people just taking leadership and doing it anyway. And the reason I say that is from experience. So I talk about the quantum stuff. I thought I wouldn't dwell on quantum too much because everyone's sick of me talking about it. But it is a real unusual situation. Australia, through Research Council, Australian Research Council, funded decades. This is its third decade of funding quantum centres of excellence and experts and stuff like that. They're up to about their 17th quantum-specific and quantum-adjacent CRCs, not CRCs, Centres of Excellence. But the thing that was interesting was that the research sector got together and said, we've got all this great stuff, how can we actually make it into an industry because we think we should? And so that's when, sort of the industry actually drove the idea to get Larry Marshall to fund a roadmap. And and I think, David, you were part of that then, and we did, no one funded it, we just sort of pushed it and went under the radar and did the first global roadmap of what is the potential economic impact for that. And also the ON program started where, if you talk to most of the people who've started quantum companies, not all from universities, some also from industry, and they said that they actually learned about entrepreneurialism and how to start a business. And so we're having this built up. But the thing that's really interesting is that then it started with Scott Morrison, who said, when I first met him, we've got all this quantum stuff, and he got really excited by it. So let's do an industry, a strategy. And then we had the Albanese government actually continue it. Now that's almost unheard of when successive governments continue supporting a program. So that we finished and Minister Husick at the time was very excited by it and could see the opportunity, and put on steroids and funded it, and we built it, and so that we now have one of the top 6 quantum industries in the world. Sydney is the 4th biggest quantum capability city in the world. Now, if we were a sporting thing, we'd be, up on the headlines. But so I guess what I'm saying is that this is done by a community doing it and coming together. And when I was chief scientist, we just ran these things we called our quantum meets and created the opportunity for businesses to grow. First of all, for industries to hear about it. So we started with sport. We've talked to Kieran Perkins and said, and their chief scientist, can we run a quantum meet sport day to see how quantum could help that? And from that, we actually then influenced Queensland Government and the Brisbane Olympics to invest, I think it was something like $6 million into quantum research within a month, because they could see it affecting and impacting the quantum. I'm hoping the Brisbane Games will be the quantum games. And then we did it with all these different industries, and it still continues, from whether it's government, built environment, mining, you name Australian company, agriculture. There was one in agriculture last week in Adelaide. And these are ones where we had no funding, no permission. We scrounged room use. We got really bad coffee and soggy sandwiches for lunch. People paid for themselves, no registration fee. We got industry coming in, and we got the heads of industry. For example, with the banking and finance, we had Anna Blair come in, and she talked about what the issues were, the unsolvable problems, and then the industry started talking with researchers and then building things up. The reason I'm explaining this is that this didn't have any imprimatur from anyone, we just did it. And I think sometimes in Australia we keep waiting for people to deliver and do things, instead of just saying, well, what can we do ourselves? What can we change ourselves? And I know that there is a need for doing, I guess, something that gets government to invest in things. But I think what we have to do is also look at where there are opportunities and milk them, I think, and then show success, and then that you do see is built on success. And I'll give you one final thing. Is one of my great delights is being on the Bradfield Development Authority, helping to build the new city near the new airport. Super exciting. But we're seeing the New South Wales government fund a $220 million packaging facility. It's not, for those of you who aren't into semiconductors, it's not about cardboard boxes. It's actually when you get a chip from Taiwan, it's just a little chip. Then you've got to actually put it into a box to be able to do stuff. And all the really important stuff is actually done by packaging facilities where they measure and put stuff in wire bond and all that. We're building that, and it's going to be one of 7 or 8 in the world in Western Sydney, which is going to mean that all businesses can come and do that. And that's sort of come about because of grassroots effort coming together and keeping on, and then suddenly getting to a point where government says, oh, this is really important. It does help to have a chief scientist and engineer in New South Wales supporting it too. But it's this building on things and feeling empowered. And I think sometimes we often don't feel empowered enough and just annoy people until they realise that this is something that's worth doing and just do it. I know it's not exactly the answer you wanted, but that's worked for me.
Yeah. I'm getting the signal that we are running out of time, but just a very small question for me to finish. So AI is the fastest moving test of everything you've described that are limiting innovation. So do you think that AI could be Australia's best shot at reducing the gap from research to trade? And you don't have to spend a lot of time answering, but just your...
Look, I think we shouldn't see it as a saviour thing. I think it should be just another tool.
Another tool.
That we learn how to use and control. I mean, we need to make sure it's got safeguards, because it's got a spectrum of things, from being able to, type in something, so I'm really looking for the data, the data I showed there about the growth centre, the catapults. The UK does not have any decent data on that. It took me ages trying to find that data. And I ended up using a whole lot of different AI tools, from whether it's LeapSpace, which is one of my favourites. It's a new Elsevier way of looking at research literature, through to, I tried Claude, it didn't work very well. ChatGPT actually found a few things. So you use it as a tool. The problem is it's also got the dark side, and I probably don't use AI tools as much as I probably could and would, but it's still on the learning term. But there's the possibility to do that. So it's one where it's going to help us uplift, but it's not going to be the saving grace. What still is required is for us to invest and believe in ourselves. But also there is a role for government to, the role of being a first procurer, the role of making sure that we've got the right workforce, the role of universities to make sure we've got the workforce, because we've got to be teaching the people for domestic students and people who want to reside here to be doing the courses we need in the subjects where the jobs are. And so we've sort of got to get all the bits working together. That'll make it work. Now is just one of the many bits.
Thank you. So I'm going to close the Q&A, and obviously we'll have opportunities to ask Cathy more questions during the networking event. So thank you very much. Just sit down
okay. Can't run away.
a little while longer. You look good in the light.
Thank you.
Can we have the light on our distinguished speaker, please? Mm-hmm. So please join me in warmly welcoming our Dean of the Faculty of Engineering, Professor Esham El-Gamal, whose leadership and vision inspires innovation and excellence across our university, to deliver the closing remarks for today's innovation lecture.
Thank you, Cathy. So let me just start by acknowledging traditional owners of the land and paying my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and thanking Kalina for an outstanding job as an MC, and thanking our counselor, Yvonne Walden, for the amazing acknowledgement of country, our chancellor for insightful remarks, our chair, Chris, for his introduction. And now I go to the highlight of the day, Dr. Foley. I think we all walked in today with very high expectations for the talk, and I'm confident that you have exceeded all our expectations. The depth of the insights, the comprehensive and your holistic understanding of the system are truly impressive. I think that's a testament to your outstanding career and contributions to the country, to science globally. It's very rare to meet someone who has actually contributed all the way from fundamental contributions to making things happen, to policy, to now your contribution to Bradfield. So thank you for all of that. I was trying to write down, actually jot down as you speak, the insights here that I would take time to reflect on, or things I agree with. I gave up after 10 minutes because it ran out. I was thinking, what can I say? And then at the end in the comment, you made something about annoying people. So that resonates. I'm a very annoying person, so that actually is the one I'm going to relate to. I think you gave a call to action for many of us, universities, private sector, government. And something that really we're in engineering we're focused on is culture change. I agree with you that everything you mentioned actually end up with as a big program of culture change. We need to change behaviors, we need to change decisions, and we've been trying to do that in the last 2 years. So it's outstanding how many things you said that resonates with me, how many things you say, that's really painful. I mean, it's really, really refreshing that your honesty in presenting that. Your 4 questions that you presented, we're going to make sure that every strategy meeting we hold in engineering, we put them out there and ask ourselves those questions. So for all of you, thank you for coming today. We appreciate your time and engagement. The Warren Center has been a pride and joy for the faculty for many years. I can give you a story about the Warren Center, so without naming names, like 6 months ago, I received an email from a very distinguished colleague in a different university, really angry at me. And they came to me and says, this person really want to talk to you. And I was like, I never met him before. Like, why is he angry at me? And then, so I go in the call, and I was like, what's going on? And then he says, you know, you removed some lectures about the Warren Center that was in the website, and this is very important to the nation. I didn't remove anything, as far as I can tell, but we just renamed something, so he couldn't find access to the lectures there, and he was seriously angry. I assured him, we're not destroying any lectures, all lectures are here, but it just shows how this has been impactful to the community. So thank you all for this, and we look forward to next year, and thank you again, Dr. Foley. So, as an acknowledgement and gratitude for today, it's my pleasure on behalf of the Warren Center and the Faculty of Engineering to present a $1,000 donation, which you have generously chosen to direct to the Children's Ground, an organization delivering education, learning, and well-being programs to Indigenous community, led by elders and cultural educators. And that's a token, that's a prompt to everybody about this organization, and thank you for choosing them.
Thank you, Hisham, and thank you, Cathy, as well, for this inspiring address. Thank you all, and have a lovely evening.